And it really, again, it comes back to the religion of Judaism, which is lacking in the principle of universality. It says that God is sublimated to the rabbis, the Gentiles are sublimated to the rabbis, and therefore, we're all just more or less sitting ducks for them. And also the idea that there's going to be peace in the Middle East. This is really a chimera, because Judaism teaches that anyone who returns the land of Eretz Israel, as they call it, of Greater Israel, to the Gentiles, is in fact a din rodef, which is a pursuer. And a din rodef is someone who can be killed immediately. The entire nation of Palestinians have been classified en masse as din rodef, because from a halakhic point of view, that means from the point of view of rabbinic law, the man-made Talmudic-based law, a din rodef is anyone who returns the land of Palestine to the Palestinians, and they can be killed. And it's sort of a kind of a preventive attack. The apologists say is that a rodef is someone who's coming to kill you, so you kill him first. But in fact, the actual definition of a rodef is, for example, a tipster who identifies a Judaic child molester to the police. Mm-hmm. An unborn baby can be aborted because it's seen as pursuing its mother. Or an Israeli prime minister like Yitzhak Rabin, who signs the Oslo Accords. All of these people were regarded as rodefs. And, I could give you quotation after quotation from Shaul Mofaz, from Rabbi Druckmann in the Israeli state, that backs all of this up, that you can kill non-Jewish civilians. This was a Talmudic edict that was issued by Druckmann, and he's not some marginal crazy in the Israeli state. He has a tremendous prestige there, and he says that the Israeli army should never hesitate to kill non-Jewish civilians in order to save Jewish lives. He even quoted a Talmudic edict from the ancient Rabbi Akiva, which states, "Our lives come first." And, of course, Israeli soldiers and officers, as even the newspaper Haaretz admitted, are influenced by these halakhic ethical commandments in terms of this is how they behave towards the subject peoples. So we know there was a Nazi ideology. People have been able to trace the contempt that Hitler had for Slavs and for Judaics, and yet very few people are allowed to come into the marketplace of ideas and raise this trail of supremacist logic and the rationale for mass murder back to the Talmudic text. Until we do that, until we have the courage and scholarship to do it, we're going to be running in circles, chasing our tails with a lot of rhetoric condemning Israeli aggression, and the American people are almost oblivious to it. But if a lot of these Christians could understand that Judaism is an anti-Old Testament religion that defames Abraham, that says that Abraham was filled with lust, that says that Noah was a drunk, that says that Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, deserved to be killed and, in fact, was killed by the followers of the oral tradition, because Isaiah had made the mistake of saying that Israel has unclean lips. And for that, the Talmud says that he was quite rightly killed. And this is when Jesus says, if you recall, he says that you are witnesses against yourselves. This is obviously a reference to Jesus' knowledge of the oral law, where in the oral law, which came to be written down after they crucified the Messiah of Israel, and they became even more corrupt, and then they committed the oral law.
Okay, let me switch a little bit on this. It is also worth noting that there are approximately 35 million American Christians who identify with Zionism, in fact, call themselves Christian Zionists. That's a pretty scary number. But beyond that, this then helps those of us who study history, especially the last century, grasp the reason, perhaps, behind the starting of 2 world wars by financiers from Wall Street and others who were in high positions. They don't, and I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, that this ecstatic embracing of the mass deaths of non-Jews is part and parcel of why over 100 million people died in the last century. And if you trace the financing of World War I and World War II, in fact, in World War II, as you well know, I think, Prescott Bush, the grandfather of the village idiot, was involved in financing the Germans. The Wall Street bankers were involved with financing both sides. We have the Bolshevik Jewish element in the Soviet Union. This whole mass execution of humanity is something sought after and reveled in by a certain portion of these very people you're talking about.
And it all depends on an intellectual hoax, because as I said about the anti-biblical nature of Judaism, and then you have these characters inside Judaism. I'll give you an example, Rabbi Moses Maimonides, who has tremendous prestige in the Christian world. He's considered a sober and prudent judge, and someone who's greatly admired by Western intellectuals, both liberal and conservative, and yet in his more or less esoteric teachings, for example, in Avodat Kovakim, chapter 10, he says, show no mercy to a non-Jew. And this is someone, and he also says that Christians should be killed. This is someone who is being held up to us as a great paradigm of Judaism. And if we had more time, Jeff, I would have gone into the Gezara Shava, which is this very strange hermeneutical principle for nullifying the Old Testament. It's woven through the Talmudic text. And a lot of people believe, because rabbis have mastery of languages, and of course they're often very voluble and articulate, that they think that that's a stand-in for genuine biblical erudition. And in fact, Judaism is a trap, as Jesus pointed out, for confusing people into this diabolical system where they actually know less about the Old Testament than a good, solid Christian scholar would, because they're constantly deceiving themselves in order to mislead the Judaic people, who, as I try to point out in my book, and I think it's also been a thread that you've pursued, are the greatest victims of Judaism. The first and greatest victims of Judaism are the Judaics themselves, who are trapped inside the stultifying and sadistic system.
Absolutely correct. Would you like to come back?
Surely.
Well, I've got openings on the 13th and 14th. Why don't you let me know if either one of those will work for you in the next day or two, and we'll have you back. I'd love to continue the conversation, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. It's been good to be here.
It's been extraordinary. My guest has been Michael Hoffman. His book is Judaism Discovered, available at his website of revisionisthistory.org, 1,100 pages. One of the truly most important books of our time, and in essence a key to helping all of us understand what's going on around us and where we are headed. A final comment from you, Michael, 30 seconds.
I guess my final comment would be to make people aware of this patriot issue, of this Israeli issue, of the anti-Semitism issue, by going back to a story in the Old Testament, which is when the prophet Elijah faced off against King Ahab. What happened? King Ahab accused Elijah of being anti-Israel. The corrupt, wicked king used the patriot card and used the anti-Semitic card to accuse a great prophet of being anti-Israel. Let us not fear to have that label attached to us when we're telling the truth.
Very good. Thank you, Michael. I look forward to our next conversation.
Same here. Thanks, Jeff.
Good night. Michael Hoffman, extraordinary effort to produce a book of this magnitude, and by virtue of its being blacklisted, you know it's worthy. Be right back.